Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. My name is Steph, and I am a 3D illustrator and animator from London. I said it in that order because I do consider myself more of an illustrator first, and I kind of fell into animating after, but now probably most of the projects I do involve animation. And before I kind of get into animation and rigging and all that stuff I want to talk about, I just want to say a big thank you to Maxon for inviting me to talk today amongst all these amazing artists. The talks that I've watched, I've found super inspiring, so hopefully I'll show you some cool stuff today and stuff you can maybe try yourself. So yeah. I am a 3D artist, but I mostly specialize in character work. I have been known to do other stuff outside of that, but most of my work kind of revolves around creating characters, which I love. And the work that I do, I really like to play with kind of expressive shapes, different body forms. I'm always using kind of really bright colors, vibrant colors, and hopefully what comes across in my work also is my sense of humor. That's something that's really important to me. So I was always taught at school that before you do a presentation, you kind of have to tell people what you're going to talk about. So now I'm going to do that. So I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about me and how I've ended up kind of on the career path that I am today. I'm going to show you a few of my projects and just talk about, my process, how I create stuff, kind of what kind of thinking goes into them. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to jump into Cinema 4D, and I'm going to show you how I rig my characters. And yeah, in terms of rigging, if anyone doesn't know what rigging is, because I was doing this presentation to my friend to practice, and he kind of said to me about 10 minutes in, what is rigging? It is, once you've created your model in Cinema 4D or whatever 3D software you use, you're essentially building a skeleton or a set of bones inside of that model, which are going to deform your mesh and kind of animate it. So that's what rigging is. And I don't think that I'm the world's best rigger by any means. I would say the things I rig, I do it pretty simply. But I just want to show today that rigging isn't as scary as everyone thinks it is. You can actually do quite simple stuff, and you can create quite effective animations with it. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of get that across to you guys. So anyway, this is my work, and as you can see, it's very kind of bright and joyful and colorful. I'm actually a self-taught artist. I think probably quite a lot of 3D character illustrators and animators are. I started learning 3D in the pandemic. Before that, I was a graphic designer, and I kind of was really bored of my job, and I announced to my company at the beginning of 2020, I'm going to go off on my own, I'm going to be a freelancer, I'm going to learn 3D, and everyone was kind of thought I was crazy. Then I thought I was crazy as the pandemic happened, and I was kind of thinking, what the hell have I done here? But actually, I think the pandemic turned into a bit of a blessing for me, because I just had loads and loads of spare time to watch tutorials, learn how to use Cinema 4D, learn how to animate. So actually, it was a blessing in disguise. And in terms of kind of how I gained a following and how I started kind of working in 3D, I just started sharing my work on Instagram, mostly to my mum and my ex-boyfriend. I had about 20 followers. And then, the more I posted, the more people started engaging with it, and kind of my work really started to gain traction. And eventually, I got to a certain point where brands were getting in touch with me, asking to work with me, which was really cool. I feel very lucky to be able to do what I do. And yeah, my top tip for anyone who wants to, get into becoming a freelance illustrator or a freelance animator, just get out there and share your work. Don't be afraid. Just get it out there. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit also about my inspiration. I am a 3D artist, but really the thing I love most in the world is stop motion. Unfortunately, I think I'm probably a little bit too lazy to be a stop motion animator. Like, I don't think I could be stood there all day, you know, tweaking the model and taking photographs. But these are two of my favorites here. I love Pingu and I love Wallace and Gromit, which is from my hometown of Bristol. Aardman Animations are still based there. And I think, you know, I love the irreverence of both of these animations, and I love that, you know, they're kind of the sense of humor and the characters really, really come across with both of these animations. So that's definitely something you can see in my work. And this is, oh, here we go. This is one of the first things I ever made in 3D. You can see that I didn't know how to polymodel, because you can see I've used a volume mesher and that the hands are kind of like webbed, because I didn't really know what I was doing. But this was made as a response to the brief in the pandemic about ways to fill your time, and my way to fill my time. And I did actually do this, was spy on my neighbors. So I thought it would be interesting to show this, and so you can see the progression from kind of where I started to where I am now. So this is some more of my work, and you can see up there in the traffic jam one, I recently started driving, and you know, I often make work inspired by what's going on around me, people around me, stuff that's happened to me, and I think that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. So, yeah. This should play is a reel of my some of my most recent work. So I'm just going to play that now. Okay, no, that's not the reel. There we go. Okay, thank you very much. So you can see, yes, I have this very specific tone of voice, and I don't think anyone's ever going to hire me if they want to do a really serious campaign. So yeah, I'm going to show you a few of my favorite projects that I've worked on over the past few years. The first one is for Costa. They are a coffee company in the UK. I don't know if anyone knows it. But I've worked with them quite a few times, actually, and they're a really, really nice client to work with. I work mostly on their social media campaigns. They're nice to work with because they're not afraid to have fun, they're not afraid to do something a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and they kind of let me have free rein creatively in terms of what I want to do. So I'm going to talk you through a recent project I did and kind of how I approached it. So often when I start a project, I don't tend to do things like mood boarding because I have such a specific style. I think when people hire me, they kind of understand visually what they're going to get from me before, you know, we've even started. But what I do tend to have to work on is how can I incorporate that brand's colors into my color palette, and kind of like how I can incorporate their messaging and blend it with my own. So this is a style frame that I did at the start of the project. The project was a short animation to advertise one of their autumnal drinks. So the color palette is, the maroon is the Costa main brand color, and that's not something I would usually use, but I think I found quite a good way to kind of incorporate it into more of my kind of color palette. And this is the storyboard that I did for the project. And I don't consider myself to be, you know, the best draftsman in the world, but I just wanted to show this today because I think it's really, really important as 3D artists to be able to sketch stuff by hand, because I used to think, oh, you know, I'm a 3D artist, so can I just go in Cinema 4D and I'll just do it in there? But I think, you know, actually sketching stuff out beforehand is really, really helpful, because it just helps me a lot in terms of kind of working out what camera movements I want to do and also thinking about, you know, the composition of each frame. So that's an example of one of my storyboards. This is a character development. This is like my favorite part of the process. Has anyone ever played The Sims here? Yeah, okay. So I played The Sims a lot as a child, and you know, I used to sit there for hours after my parents had gone to bed, you know, putting different outfits on my characters and like styling the hair differently. So it's kind of crazy now that as an adult, I sometimes get to do this as part of my job. And yeah, whenever I get to design an outfit for a character, I always have so much fun. And yeah, a lot of the characters that I do, I like to include a lot of detail and like little accessories and just things for the audience to kind of pick up on. So that's absolutely my favorite part of my job. And I think, oh, yes. I said I didn't mood board when I do projects, but I do tend to have quite a deep think about what kind of animation style I'm going for. And you'll see me kind of talk about this a bit later on as well, but I'm very much influenced by traditional animation, you know, things like Wallace and Gromit, but also Looney Tunes. I love kind of, and I don't think my work is quite there yet, but I love kind of playing with squash and stretch and, you know, really like exaggerated anticipation in animation. And yeah, that's definitely something I'm trying to push more in my work. I think sometimes as an animator and as a 3D animator, I used to find when I first started that my models could look a little bit rigid, and I really wanted to try and capture a bit more of that feeling of 2D hand-drawn animation. And so, yeah, I was trying that out with this project, and I think the next... Yeah, so I really wanted to kind of mimic that kind of pacing you might see in something like Looney Tunes in this animation. And yeah, I think is fairly successful, but I always think I can do more with this kind of stuff. And next, I just wanted to take you through, in this project, I actually did a double take animation that's quite common in kind of older things like Looney Tunes and maybe Disney that you see quite a lot. So I just wanted to take you through kind of the motion. So first she's walking along, she spots this board. She's doing a double take now, so before she looks back at the board, she kind of squishes it. You can see the head is almost kind of inside of the body there, and that's to exaggerate the next movement where she's like super shocked. And that's definitely something, you know, that's a principle taken from traditional animation. So that kind of sense of like squish and then elongate, I'm always trying to do like loads of that in my more recent work. So yeah, I just thought it would be interesting to show you guys that. The next project I'm going to talk about is something I did for Melissa, and they are a jelly shoe brand, which is a really lovely project to work on, and actually one of my first big animation projects I ever did. I think up until this point, I'd only really been doing stuff for social media. And you'll see in a second, because I will show you, but this video was kind of projected on big screens inside of their shops in New York and Brazil. And I wanted to show this because I think when I got this project, I was quite nervous because I'd never done anything kind of beyond 30 seconds before. But I guess what I want to say is when you do get a project that you're kind of, you feel it, or maybe I can't do this, it's a really good opportunity to try and push yourself. So with this animation, because it was longer form, I wanted to really practice doing transitions because I'd never done them before. So you can see I wanted to create this kind of feeling of like just one long camera shot. And kind of each section is blending into the next section. And yeah, it was just a really nice project. Again, they gave me creatively free rein to kind of do what I want, which was really nice. And yeah, I'll show you the animation in a second inside of the shop, which was very cool. And yeah, I think always shoehorning in the characters, got them in at the end of the animation. Okay, where's that? So this is what the animation looked like actually in the store. So this is in the New York store. And sadly, I didn't get to go and see it, which is really sad because I would have loved to. You can see as the person walks into the shop, it's kind of, they're immersed in the world of my animation, which was very, very cool. But hey, maybe someone else will ask me to do this again, and I'll get to go and see it in person because I would have loved to. So yeah, that's my Melissa project. And then finally, sorry, I don't know why these videos keep playing twice. This is a really recent personal project that I've done. And it was basically, it actually started off as a poster inspired by a trip I took to New York, and I was kind of just walking around, and all these people were carrying, you know, cats around in prams, and they had these dogs in these really fancy outfits, and I thought it would be really fun to make a piece of art out of it, which is kind of how I ended up with this. And I think, you know, in my more recent work, what I love doing is creating something that just has loads going on, loads of detail, so that, you know, you might look at it once, but you'll come back to it and you'll see something different. And whilst it's very different to this, this is Bosch Garden of Earthly Delights, which I saw in Madrid last year. I just love how every time you look at this, you just have a look at a different character, and that's definitely something I'm trying to like emulate in my work. And I also think, I mean, maybe he didn't mean for it to be, but I just like how silly this painting is. It's also really like quite dark and scary on this side, but yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, so it speaks to me. So yeah, that was my work about me, and I want to talk now about how I model from illustrations that I draw, because I think I probably do it in a slightly unconventional way now. So these are some of my hand-drawn sketches. When I first started 3D, I think I really found that I would sketch something on paper and it would look really cool, and then I'd try and make it in 3D, and it would almost lose some of the energy that I had captured in the sketch. So I've really been trying to work on like how can I kind of bring my 2D sketching and my 3D work closer together. And one of the main things I've actually stopped doing is modeling all my characters in a T-pose. Obviously, sometimes you really do need to model your character in a T-pose, especially if you want to see them from all angles. It needs to work. But if you're like me and you're kind of modeling stuff from an illustration that you've drawn, and it's just going to exist as an illustration, we don't need to see the back of it, then you don't really need to model it in a T-pose. And I just have shown this example here because this is older work that I did, and then this is something I did this year. And you can see kind of the newer work, there's way more of a sense of like dynamic movement and kind of, I think it's more expressive. And just to show you from the side, so on the older model, that was modeled in a T-pose. All the limbs are kind of connecting, and you can see I've kind of spent quite a long time putting hairs on the back of the leg that like no one's gonna see. Whereas on the newer work, I mean, I don't know what's going on around here. There's like a hand on its own, and you know, there's hair everywhere. It doesn't look very good from the side, but it doesn't matter because you're not gonna see it from the front. And as someone who works on their own, it's a massive time saver to do that. So I would highly recommend, if you're doing an animation or you're even just doing a 3D illustration, just have a think about, do I actually need to model this? I think when I first started modeling, I felt like everything must be perfect. And it's been quite liberating to not worry about that. So this is just showing you, like, I tend to model everything in front view, so I'll just put my sketch behind and I'll just model it from front view, and I won't worry too much about what it looks like from the side. This also sometimes, like, working in a weird way creates happy mistakes, because I think in some of my more recent work there is this really nice juxtaposition between the 2D and the 3D, and I really like that relationship. Like, you see something, you think it's a 2D animation, and then it spins around and you're like, wow, this is 3D. So this is just another example of one of my very messy models from behind. So you can see, like, the throne is not really a throne. She's not sat on anything. Yeah. This is the dog poster that I showed you earlier. And yeah, all the characters are on this. I modeled just from the front. I didn't do any T-poses. And if you actually look at the viewport, it looks pretty weird because everything's very spaced out and not really placed in a place that makes sense. But again, like, I highly recommend experimenting with this way of working, because I think you can almost be kind of more painterly when you work like this. And yeah, it's definitely been a real game changer for me to not worry too much about things making sense within the viewport, just thinking about how are they going to look through that camera. So yeah, okay, we've moved on to the juicy bit. We're going to talk about animation. So here you can see some of my animations, and all of these are animations from that work I was just showing you. And yeah, as I've said, I'm very into traditional animation, so I definitely try and think about those 12 principles of animation. I don't know if people are familiar with, but it's things like squash and stretch, anticipation before you do something, overlapping action. Follow through as well is a thing I really, really like to play with in my work, because I kind of like my characters to be all bendy. But I think, I mean, maybe it's obvious, but it's great to think about, if you're starting an animation, what emotion am I trying to convey through that? Is my character really tired? Do I want them to be kind of dragged along? Or are they really excited and having, like, steps really quickly? It's really good to just kind of play around with that, and play around with that when you're doing walk cycles. So yeah, that is just some of the ways I approach animation. I know, I think I was speaking to someone last night about this, as kind of, as animators, we're almost like actors. And it's really interesting, because I think sometimes we think when we're doing animation, in order to convey a motion, we need to make the gesture really, really big, but actually sometimes a small gesture can do just the same thing. So yeah, that's all stuff that's definitely worth thinking about. Here is Homer Simpson. No, the reason I've put this on is because I was reading this book and they were talking about early Homer Simpson having these kind of eyes that almost face outwards and him having this very vacant look. And the reason that they did that is because when someone has a kind of vacant stare, it's almost up to the audience member to decide what emotion he's feeling. And I definitely think I do that a lot in my work with this egg. I mean, aesthetically, I like the way that kind of eyes look, but I don't tend to animate the faces on my characters. I tend to try and convey the emotion through their body movements, and I just like to leave the eyes quite vacant. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go into a bit more of the technical stuff now to do with how I create my animations. Let's see how much time we have. Cool. So I think, you know, when we're animators, we focus so much on like keyframes and maybe the rig, but I would say probably the most important thing as a 3D animator in the animation process is your model. So it's really important, obviously, to be using kind of quad-based topology. So when you do move the rig around, it's not going to deform in some awkward way. I'm very much a fan, and you can see this on my model. I use very, very low poly counts on my models, purely because I find it easier to weight paint it, and it saves me time. I know other people use kind of way more denser meshes than me, but this is how I like to do it. And yeah, what I said before, like, don't only model stuff that you're going to see in the scene. Don't spend loads of time like modeling stuff that no one's ever going to see. There's no point. And with rigging, again, like, I love using dynamic rigs. So you can see on the goose on the left-hand side, the only bit of that I've animated is the base of the neck. So the whole other part of the rig is just determined by the dynamics and also the bow as well. And I find this is a great way, especially if you've got to do stuff quickly, adding dynamics on your rigs can just add some real interest to your characters. So you can see it on the feather on the cap there, that's all dynamics. I haven't animated any of that myself at all. So I often like to add accessories to my characters that have dynamic rigs that are going to like accentuate the motion. And yeah, okay, now it's time to show you some stuff in Cinema 4D. So I'm going to quickly show you how I rig stuff, and then I'll show you just in terms of talking about some hierarchical stuff to do with rigs and to do with the where group stuff. And then I will show you the dynamic rig and the deformer. So yeah, this is a model I made earlier. And you can see if I just come in here, it's got no neck. It's a very, very, very simple model. It's not really like modeled properly. But I only want to see this model from the front. So, you know, it's fine for it not to have a neck. And yeah, so when I want to rig stuff, as I said, I generally do it in front view. And it's really easy. I just start by kind of drawing in a skeleton. And because I tend to rig, a lot of my characters look very similar, unless I'm dealing with something like animals. I kind of can do this very quickly. I'm just drawing in a spine now. There's a neck. And then he'll want some legs. I'm doing this super, super fast, so it's not really very neat. But yeah, I mean, that's really the basis of most of my rigs, and that took me like 2 minutes. But for the purposes of this, I'm not going to use that. I'm actually going to show you a rig that I made earlier. So yeah, if we come into 4-up view now, you can see that my character is rigged. So you can see here, I've named everything. Just a quick point on kind of hierarchies within your rig. So if you're doing a walk cycle, you'll normally, want the hips to be the top thing of the rig, because if the hips move, you want the legs to move, and you want the arms to move as well. So you can see that's kind of what I've mirrored here. The legs are a child of the hips, the spine is a child of the hips, and the arms are a child of the spine. If you wanted to animate someone, I don't know, like hanging from a bar and swinging back and forth, if I was doing that, I would make the hands the kind of main hierarchy, and then rotate the hands, my whole rig will move. So that's just something worth thinking about. At the moment, nothing is bound to this rig. If I move it up and down, nothing happens. So we need to bind our model to the rig, which is really, really easy. So what I'm going to do is just select my model. Okay. And then I'm going to come up here and select my rig. Ooh, there. And then I'm just going to say character bind. Okay. Cool. Now, if Cinema 4D is being nice to me, it should move, my mesh should move when I rotate my rig. Okay, it's not being nice to me. That's fine, because I have one that I made earlier. So let's jump to that. Okay. So this is one I bound earlier, and you can see when I move the rig, it's deforming my mesh, but it's doing it in a weird way, like what's going on there? That's not really what we want. So what you need to do now is do a bit of weight painting to correct that. So I'm going to just quickly show you a little bit of weight painting. So if I turn the subdivision surface off, we can see it a bit easier. And I'm just going to open the weight manager. Okay. You can see there, can you see? Yeah. You can see the weight map. So this is telling you like what parts of your mesh are controlled by which parts of the bone. So if I click on the left up leg, which is what I want to control this part of my mesh, you can see it's only really controlling like one side of it. It's not controlling the other side. So I need to correct that. And this is why I like having low poly models, because all I need to do is just select that and then say add. And now you can see it's all orange, which means when I move my rig, when I move the left leg on my rig, that part of the mesh will move as well. I'm just going to do it for the knee. So I'm going to say left knee. Yeah, same problem. You can see it's not completely controlled by the left leg. I'm going to say add. Okay. And now, if I turn that back on, we should be able to see that when I move my left leg, yeah, great. So that's what we want. So that's a very, very, very simple example of weight painting. And when you've rigged something, you do need to go through and just check that all the weight painting is correct. Otherwise, you might get weird deformations like I had. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to just jump out of Cinema 4D quickly back into my presentation and talk to you about hierarchies. So when I animate a scene, I like to have a think about the group as a whole, but then I also like to think about inside of that group, what parts do I want to move? So within this group here, which is a person pushing a pram with a cat in it, obviously there's going to be a walk cycle on the man. I want the pram to move up and down, so that's one whole group. And actually what's worth pointing out, the hands I want to move with the pram. I don't want them to move with the man's walk cycle, because otherwise I'm going to have to go through and like keyframe it, and it's going to be really, really difficult. So I just need to think about that when I'm putting my rig together and when I'm grouping my objects. I want the wheels to move independently. I might want the frame and the hands to move independently. And I want the cat and the basket to move independently, so I can create some of that kind of overlapping action. As the pram goes up, the basket will kind of go up afterwards, and it will create that kind of really nice smooth animation that we're always looking for. So in Cinema 4D, if we go to, we can see I've jumped ahead now, so I've animated the thing. And I'm just going to show you. So if I come into, sorry, I normally work on a big computer, so working on a laptop is kind of not what I'm used to. But I'm just going to show you the pram animation. So within the pram animation, if I play it for you now, I'm just going to turn off these bits. The pram is moving up and down, but that kind of looks not very good. It's very like rigid and static, and yeah, it's not very inspiring. What would like spice it up a bit, I think, is if the pram and the cat also have a bit of movement independently to the whole group. So I'm just going to turn that on. Yeah, and you can see now it's a little bit more interesting. And this is something I do all the time. I tend to group my objects in such a way that I can kind of create these overlapping animations. And there you can see as well, the hands are moving as part of this group. They're not attached to the rig. So let me just stop that 1 second. Okay, I'm going to show you how I group them in the over here to get that kind of effect. So this is my pram hierarchies group. So you can see I've got the whole group. The man is a group. He's doing a walk cycle. We don't need to worry too much about that. The hands are actually in this group here. The hands are in this kind of pram group. So if I zoom in, you can see them. They're not attached to the guy's rig. And then within that pram group, so that whole group, you can see I've got some keyframes on the pram group, which is just that pram going up and down. I also have the frame is a group, which I've animated, and the pram cat is a group as well, and I've applied animations to that. And I guess what I'm trying to get across is it's just good to try and pre-plan that stuff when you're working on your animations, like what kind of hierarchy I want to do, because once you've started animating stuff and then you try and put it in groups, it's really difficult. So I'd recommend you try and think about that before you start animating. And then the final thing I want to show you is some deformers and dynamics. And I always use this kind of stuff because it really is an amazing way of just adding some extra interest to your animations. So at the moment, if we look at the cat's tail, I mean, that's not very good. That's not really how tails work. And I could keyframe that tail. You can see the rig on the tail. I'm just going here because it's a bit easier to see. I could spend loads and loads of time rigging the tail and then making it do all these like fancy animations. But I don't want to do that because that's going to take me loads of time. But what I can do is if I just bring up this group, there's an IK rig on the cat tail that I've added. And once you add your IK, if you then come into this little dynamics tab here, and you click enable, don't worry, it's going to come back. It's not going to disappear. Now if I play the animation, there's a really nice little animation on the cat tail that I didn't have to actually do anything to achieve. And yeah, it just adds some like really nice flavor to your animation. So I'd recommend looking into things like that. I also really like to add shear objects to my animations. I think you probably might have noticed that a lot of my work is kind of very slanty and going this way, and that's because I probably get a bit like overexcited with the shear. But I think it kind of does add something to the animations. You can see here as the man pulls back on the buggy, I've got that shear just like pulling back slightly. And yeah, it does make a big difference. If I turn it off, it kind of like looks completely different. So yeah, I'd recommend using that. And that's really kind of a whirlwind stop of, or a whirlwind tour, not a whirlwind stop, of how I do animations. And this is the final animation. And yeah, that's kind of how I put stuff together. And then if I just jump back to my presentation, yes, here is the final render of the animation that I've added some lighting to. I've added just a kind of normal 3-light setup, so like a key, a rim, and a fill. I've added a dome light. I also really, really, really like adding spotlights because they create these kind of really nice contrasts in the work. So yeah, that's my new thing, is playing with spotlights. And that's it, really, for my talk. I don't know if anyone has any questions about anything that they've seen. Yeah, let me know. Thank you. Oh, and if you would like to scan this QR code, one of you could win a Maxon 1 license, which I think is really cool. So, yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah?
You said you started doing 3D during quarantine. What got you to do Cinema 4D in particular?
Yes, so I did try Blender. I'm probably not meant to say this on a Maxon tutorial, but I tried it and I just didn't like it at all. I find Cinema 4D like really intuitive and much more closer to the way I was working when I was a graphic designer, and I found it really easy to use, and I just really liked all the tools. So that's why I've stuck with Cinema 4D, and I really like it. Yeah? Yeah, so I make them all myself, and I think the reason being is because I do like my work to kind of have that handmade feel, and I like to be able to really control what things look like. I've tried to use Marvelous Designer before, but I find that it's almost too good. And that sounds really weird, but it kind of makes my work look too slick. And I much prefer it when I do them myself. And it is sometimes a challenge when I've modeled clothes to try and make them move in the way I want to, but I definitely find like using stuff like dynamic rigs helps me with that. Yeah? How did I get the dynamics to move? To loop. They should just loop if your motion loops, because the dynamic, I mean, again, this is going beyond my field of expertise, but yeah, I guess if you're looping the dynamics and it's, if you're looping the motion and the dynamics are just kind of working off the motion, then it should just loop. Hello, yeah.
When you add motion to the objects or animals or people, do you take inspiration from like real life motion, or do you just use from your imagination how the bag, for example, moved?
Yeah, it's a combination, really. I think for things like bags and stuff like that, I do tend to just do it from how I think I want it to look. But definitely if I'm doing any motion that's quite complicated, especially if it's like, you know, someone sitting down or someone doing something very complex, I will take videos of myself, or I'll try and find a reference online to kind of work from. I did a triple axel ice skating animation once. That was quite challenging. Should have put that in, but anyway. Yes?
So in Blender there is the term grease pencil, and I see that you use it a lot in your works, but I don't know yet how to do it in C4D.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was just talking to someone about this outside because I was talking to one of the Adobe Substance people, which is something I really want to try and get into. At the moment, the way I do it is I export my models into Procreate, and then I draw on them in Procreate, and then I export it back into Cinema. But I think in terms of what Substance can do, I think it's a lot more powerful and you can do a lot more with it, so I really want to explore that. I can't see everyone at the back. Yes? How did I animate the bag? Okay, let me try and show you, because I felt like I ran out of time, but I will show you now. So, okay, yeah, here we are in the bag. The bag, so the way I've done it, and I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but the bag strap, it's a sweep on a spline, but the spline is a tracer object. And so the tracer object is tracing, sorry, let me turn the shear off because it's a bit confusing with that on. The tracer object is tracing these orange nulls. And what I've done, this is my very complicated way of working. The nulls are actually inside of the person's rig. I don't know if you can you see that? And you can see, like, if I grab a null, let's grab this one, and move it down, it moves the bag strap. And that's just the way I like to do these things. I just find I'm always looking for like very simple solutions, because I think when I use too many simulations, for me personally, I get a bit confused. So yeah, tracer objects are really cool, I think. So something to check out. Yes. Hello. At the back. Yeah, I think just because I liked it and I like the way, I like the layout. I find it really easy to use. I like Redshift. You can see my work has a very specific look, and I think Redshift obviously works really well with Cinema 4D. And yeah, that's probably why. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of do create them all myself, and it's all from stuff I've collected from random places. Like, I think when I first started, I downloaded that pack from Grayscale Gorilla, but someone else was saying this the other day, I tend to mix and match things, so I might take like a roughness map from one material and then a kind of a bump map from something else and mix them all together. Hello. Yeah? Yeah, so I would say that EJ Hassenfras taught me everything that I know. Definitely, if you want to do this kind of style, like my kind of style, he's a great person to watch. So I think I just watched loads of his. And then, yes, a lot of my kind of technique just comes from trial and error. I think when I first started doing 3D, like I said, like, if I wanted the hands to, you know, grab onto a handlebar, I'd kind of try and keyframe it myself, and then I just kind of worked out, no, you don't need to do that at all. So yeah, it's definitely just making as much work as you possibly can and just trial and erroring it. Yeah, at the back. Yeah, I do sometimes, I have to say, like, I think this is really common for illustrators who turn into animators. When I first started doing it, I just used to animate forward and not really like know where it was going to take me. But yeah, now I do try and do that a little bit. Okay, any more questions? Is that it? All right, well, thank you so much. Yeah, and go and make lots of fun animations.